It recently occurred to me how sad it is that we spend a majority of our time focused on things that, in the grand scheme of things, don't really matter that much. I feel like it's sad for a number of reasons, because we do need certain material, superficial things in order to survive and in order to take care of our human needs. And yet, I always find myself having moments where it's like my head is buried in the sand, and then suddenly my head pops out and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, truly, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think these moments are very sobering for me, and I had one of them this weekend, which is why I'm speaking about this today. So this isn't like a normal tips and tricks video. This is more just real talk about the challenges of being a conscious being and choosing to evolve, and how difficult that can be. Or we wake up to the reality of having to play this 3D game in order to meet our needs and also to align with our higher purposes and like help those things come to fruition. So yeah, I feel like I wanted to speak on this because I spent a lot of time with a younger part of myself over the last couple of weeks who was deeply conditioned to meet the expectations of other people who I wanted the love and the approval of, people who really shaped me, and I was given a set of expectations and I allowed that to be my identity. And anytime that my image of myself that I created was not aligning with these sets of guidelines, then I would shift. I would shapeshift again and again and again. Our programming and our conditioning is really a lot of shoulds. Like, we should do this, we should do that. We were told that we should be a certain way, that we should focus on certain things, prioritize money, prioritize success, prioritize status, prioritize very surface level things to get ahead in this world. And there's some truth in that. I mean, we do live in a 3D world where money is a necessity of life, and when you're successful, it is definitely easier to acquire money. That's not untrue. And at the same time, personally, I've been having a lot of sudden moments of realization and coming to, where I realize just how much I've been playing into societal programming. And for me, as a conscious being who is dedicated to my path of evolution, doing has consumed a majority of my life. And I am not afraid to admit that. I think that the programming that we are subject to is so intense. And for me, from a young age, the shoulds that I was told all revolved around performance, around excelling, around being the best and outperforming everybody else. And while that definitely served me for a time, working very hard behind the scenes, people didn't really see just how much effort and energy and time and intention that it took to uphold such a high standard. Initially, it was to appease my parents, and then over time, it just became an internalized set of standards that I held myself to rigorously. And I feel a lot of sadness as I say that. I recently realized that kids like us, we don't get to have a normal childhood. I didn't really feel like I had a lot of fun. I didn't really get to play. I'm only doing that now as an adult. But when I was little, I had to grow up pretty quickly and start thinking about how to be better. From a really young age, I personally was put into classical piano training at the age of 4 until I was 16. And after I graduated from that program, I actually stopped listening to music, playing music entirely for years after that. And those are some of the darkest years of my life, actually. I look back at that version of myself, her little white dress, at her first, after having won her first piano scholarship at 4 years old, and I feel really sad for her. I am grateful as an adult for being able to play piano and having developed the skills that I did, although it really came at a cost. So I don't think that necessarily performance at a young age in and of itself is a negative thing. Although when it's paired with lack of support and not a strong, no foundation of self-worth, it was extremely toxic for me to grow up in that kind of environment. And that was the beginning, the seeds being planted of a life where everything was a performance. Having to do well at school, having to be the highest performing athlete, having to have not just one successful business, but multiple successful businesses, having to do the impossible, constantly breaking through people's expectations and delivering even more. All the while feeling on the inside like it's never enough. The truth is that it is enough. It's always been enough. And these other thoughts and beliefs and experiences, while they're valid, they're also products of the lies that we've been told, the lies that we tell ourselves as we perpetuate the conditioning that keeps us stuck in performance mode 24/7. We have a tendency to cling to what is familiar, even if that familiar path is way more painful. Every time we start over, it is an opportunity to do things differently. I think that the things that are familiar are the path of least resistance until we register in our consciousness that we are finished with the pain and with the suffering, the discomfort that that particular pattern has brought into our life. And then at that point, there's a shift where we have awareness and we're able to make a different choice from a perspective of healing. I feel like there is a point where the life force energy is awakened, where we've just been through too much. We've suffered enough. We just cannot carry on the way that we've been doing. We've all had those moments of rock bottom or just really challenging times. And then there's that rebound effect that happens once we've hit the bottom, the true bottom. The natural law says that what goes down must also come back up. And so there's some comfort in that. For me, I hit that point this weekend. I kept thinking I was at the bottom, done with this pattern of performing, playing into external validation, playing into focusing on outcomes, measures of success, numbers, money, more. And the equation wasn't making sense. It hasn't been making sense for me for more than a couple of months, about a year now. The equation I've been sitting with is, why do I find myself giving and giving and giving and feeling like I'm not receiving enough? And after working through those initial layers of realizing that I do actually deserve to receive in equal proportion to what I'm giving, I traced this back to this pattern from when I was a child and expected to overperform, overgive. And when I was a child, the only output that I could give at the time was my gift, my talents, my creativity. So I pawned that off unknowingly, unwittingly, as a child would, so that I could receive in return, or thinking that I could receive in return, love from a source that was not actually capable of meeting me there in what I actually needed. So there was this vicious, endless cycle of giving and giving more and giving more, thinking that if I just gave enough, that they would see that I was worthy of the love that I wanted to receive. And I didn't know for the longest time, I didn't know until just a few years ago that this was not my fault, and that this was not their fault either. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it easier. It doesn't condone any of the really hard, painful stuff that happened as a result of that. It just was what it was. There's a lot of pain in not getting your needs met, and that drive to just be better and do better often, I find, comes from our unmet needs. Feeling like we did something wrong or just didn't do enough. And that if we just did enough, that we would have received what we wanted to receive. Not realizing that the equation was broken from the very beginning. There's an extraction dynamic that's happening on both sides of that equation. Caregivers who have really high expectations are extracting from their children to meet whatever it is that is unmet within them. And then the child equally extracts from the parents, trying to receive a love that they're not capable of giving. And so I find it really interesting contemplating these topics and the forces and the influences that shape who we are and who we are becoming, and the intense duality and extremes that many of us experience. Like for me, I was raised under very extreme and rigid expectations, and while there's a lot of pain and suffering that comes with that, there's also different kind of pain and suffering that happens on the other side of the spectrum, where there is no structure, no guidance, no expectations at all. And that's not what I have experience with, but I have had people close to me who grew up in that way. And just when we talk about our upbringings, it's just polar opposite. And for many of us, we find our way back into a place of middle ground. We had to go into the extreme, learn some really difficult lessons, and then come back to a place of moderation. I was asked the question over the weekend, if money didn't matter, what would you be doing? And I couldn't answer that question initially. I definitely had a moment of freeze in my body, recognizing that up until very recently, I haven't been operating from a place of truly living life the way that I desire to, living the life that I want. And over time, slowly, I can see how each transition, each identity, each step of this journey has helped me to embody more of my authentic self and the life that feels most aligned. Even as I sit here now with almost complete freedom with my time and my energy, it's still a challenge. Having come out of a world where I was taught that work ethic is everything, how hard you work determines what you receive in this life, and I'm still figuring that out. I feel a bit like the bird in the cage, that when the door opens to the cage, it has the opportunity to free itself, and yet it's like, but this cage is all that I've known for my whole life. Like, I don't really know how to fly free. Even though the door is open, I can feel it and I can see it, and that's okay. I have a lot of compassion and understanding for the feeling of not knowing whether it's safe to trust this and whether it's safe for life to be easy, where it doesn't all have to be for something, to do something, to accomplish something. For so much of my life, I was racing to get somewhere. And I would find that when I did get there, the joy of that was only temporary. Sometimes even as quickly as the next day, I would find myself with that feeling of emptiness again. On to the next thing. This must not be it. This isn't what I thought it would be. And I'm at the place in my life now where I think I can finally say that I'm okay with not placing my happiness and my sense of fulfillment and my higher purpose in something external. I've been shown in many, many different ways over the last couple of years that I've needed to redefine my vision and definition of success, what matters to me, and what I'm really here for. I went from being here to be the best and do the best and meet everyone else's expectations to now just being and not having to follow any structures, rules, expectations about how I should be spending my time, how I should be making money, what my life should look like. I don't buy into that anymore. I have my moments, of course, as a human. And for me, at least, I've become, and maybe this is true for others of you who are on a similar path of deconditioning and learning that life is not a performance. It might be helpful if I share what I've discovered that one of my life purposes is, which is to just experience life the way that I want to. And a phrase that's coming through right now that I want to share is that I've reminded myself of constantly is that just because I can doesn't mean that I should. And this I think is helpful for any of you who are also overgivers, where just because we can help or we can give or we're in the position to do something doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, or that that's the aligned choice in that moment. And that justification can simply just be because I don't want to. And I think coming to terms with that has been kind of a trip for me, realizing that I've been a puppet of expectations that they don't really matter. And so finding freedom in my actions and my behaviors, being intentional and more conscious about, why am I doing what I'm doing? Do I actually want to? And it can be enough just to say no because I don't want to. No, thank you, because I don't want to, or I don't need it. And those phrases have been incredibly useful and empowering in my own life, and reclaiming my personal power and realizing that I don't have to be everything to everyone, that it's okay to just be myself, and that's good enough. And if people don't appreciate that, That's okay. They probably just don't appreciate themselves either. And that's the truth. So if you are also struggling with performance-related wounds and patterning, I see you. And you're definitely not alone on this path. It's a difficult one. Learning to live your life for you and not for anybody else. And learning to experience failure, rejection, disappointments, falling through your own illusions. I'm just laughing thinking about the ones who were creating this particular life path behind the scenes, just chuckling, thinking like, oh, these ones are these ones are gonna be in for a ride. Yeah, because it's truly a ride. There is light on the other side of the tunnel, though. I will say there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of ease and there's so much magic of your ability to create just for you. And if you want to, you can share your creations with other people and to be able to like receive in a way that feels so nourishing and so abundant and so aligned with what you know that you deserve. And it's no longer for validating worth. It's no longer for the pats on the head. And it's no longer for the trophies or the medals or the money. It's not an easy place to stay. And it's a constant practice for me as I feel like I'm just arriving in that space and state now as I'm sharing this. And to be present with what I desire to experience, to listen to my body as my guide every day, not some set of rules or expectations that somebody else impresses upon me. Being able to do and be who I want to be, because that's what I want to experience. Not because it looks cool or because of what people would think, but truly just because I deserve it. And so do you. It is possible to be enough. And it takes a lot of work to unlearn the thoughts and the beliefs and all the patterning and the trauma, honestly, that leads us to believe otherwise. But it is possible. You're gonna get there in your own timing, and every step of the way is exactly what it needs to be for you to break out of this mold and create your own. I believe in you. I'll see you in the next video.